We're talking really today about two things ultimately: illness and, just frankly speaking, the afterlife. That's part of what I've been talking to Gary about for a few years, and we've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a long time, actually. And this comes at a very good time for those of you who have arrived more, it's Gary's birthday today. So we say Yom Huledet Sameach to Gary Howard Merrill. A couple of thoughts about Bikor Cholim, the mitzvah of visiting the sick. Bikor Cholim, visiting sick. It is a paramount mitzvah. It's a very, very important mitzvah to visit people who are sick. That visiting can take different forms. I would say it's certainly, prayer is important, but actually visiting someone, it could be a call as well, is, I would say, more important. Actually, your presence, your listening presence, your sacred presence with those who are sick. It says in Talmud that when we visit someone who is sick, it takes away 1/60th of their illness. Talmud talks about this really beautiful story of one sage, I think it was Rabbi Yochanan, visiting another sage, Eliezer, I believe, or Elazar, who, and the second sage, Elazar, let's say, was sick. He was in a bait afel, a house of complete darkness, really symbolic of his illness. And he's there in bed, ill, sick. And Rabbi Yochanan comes in and he sits, he sees it's completely dark. Afela or afel is a real deep, deep darkness. And the Yochanan comes in and he sits on the edge of the bed and he does something really remarkable. It's in the tractate Brachot of Talmud. He rolls up his sleeve, and when he rolls up his sleeve, light emanates from his skin. It is said that Rabbi Yochanan was so special in every single way, including physically, that his skin shone. But what's really amazing is when light emanated from his skin, his forearm, it says, the whole house went from a house of darkness to a Beit Or, to a house of light, symbolic of how visiting someone who is sick can really bring light to them, can really bring healing to them. So let's keep that in mind when we have someone that we know is sick. Reach out to them, call them, do the mitzvah of Bikor Cholim. And now just a very quick note on what happens after we die according to our tradition. Here, spoiler alert, no one knows. Even though there's all this speculation, it's imaginative. Our sages were wise enough to know that, what do we really know? We don't really know. Maimonides even, for whom it was doctrine that there will be resurrection of the dead, said ultimately don't ask questions about it because we just don't know the details of that. He thought it was important that we Jews believe in ultimate resurrection of the dead, bodily resurrection of the dead. But he said, don't trouble yourself with the details because we don't know. He said, we'll learn when we die. We'll know later. There are many, many fanciful ideas about this. In the tractate Shabbat, the sages speculate on various things like how long someone who has died retains consciousness. And they say that, or what some sage or others said, that someone who has died, a dead person, is conscious and knows what's going on around her or him, and even what people are saying about her or him until the vault is over the grave. So be careful about that. They also say that the body is tethered to the soul. The soul is tethered to the body for a year after someone has died. And that there's this one really wild thing, that the righteous souls rest under Kisei Kavod, or Kisei HaKavod, the throne of glory, and wicked souls are thrown around from one edge of the universe to the other by angels. So there's lots of interesting speculation. At the very foundation, though, I would say, is what we know from our prayer books, which is that the soul is eternal, that God implanted the soul within us, in our bodies. The souls remained with us while we were alive. And when we die, the soul returns to Hashem, to God. And then in the world to come, when there is a bodily resurrection, the souls return to those bodies. So that, I would say, is a sort of fundamental belief. At the very least, the eternality of the soul. But again, who knows? Well, there might be an answer to that question because some people have had what we often call near-death experiences. And we don't know what happens with a near-death experience. Actually, it's impossible to really know. But Gary has shared an experience that he had. Gary, who has been really open about this and has had long COVID and had a very intense experience at the early part of that. And since Gary shared that with me, I've been eager to have this conversation with all of you who are here and at home as well. Gary Merrill. Gary Merrill is a retired lieutenant and shift commander with the Cook County Sheriff's Office. He served for the Sheriff's Office for Cook County for 28 years. He received the First Responder of the Year Award from Shomrim and Cook County Sheriff's Award of Excellence. He is involved with the Sigma Alpha Mu, which is his fraternity, where he was at UIC, and now he's a chapter advisor for the UIC chapter of the SAMI, Sigma Alpha Mu. He's also the president of our men's club, by the way. Gary was born in Evanston, Illinois. He grew up in East Rogers Park, graduated from Sullivan High School, has been in Skokie for most of his adult life, and as I said before, today, March 30th marks his 68th birthday. So Yom Holedet Sameach, Gary. Gary Merrill, are you ready for my questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So first, just very quickly and basically, when were you first diagnosed with COVID? Can you pin down a date to that?
Yes.
You can.
So on March 31st, 2020, in the emergency room at Evanston Hospital, ironically where I was born, I was diagnosed with COVID.
Okay, so it was March 31st. After how long had you been, I remember they thought that you were having an asthma attack.
Yeah, so they didn't know as much about COVID back then as we do now. There weren't as many testing kits, so I've been having problems. They had me on antibiotics, prednisone, inhalers, and it got a little better. I saw a pulmonologist. He extended the prednisone and the antibiotics. Wasn't getting completely better, and it started getting worse.
Right. So that's my next question is when, can everyone hear Gary as well? Good. When did it become apparent to you, when did it really dawn on you that this was serious?
So I knew something was wrong with my breathing, and on the 31st of March in the evening, I called my doctor up. He got back to me, and he said, we're not giving you any more antibiotics or the other medicines. You got to get to the hospital. I said, I don't have a fever. And back then, they thought you had to have a fever to have COVID. I told my doctor that my temperature was like 97.8, 98.7. A little short time later, after getting to the hospital, they took my temperature again upon my arrival, and a short time later, went up to 101.9. They did the COVID test. At Evanston was one of the few places back then that could do the test and get the results immediately. And they put me in this nice little room, looked like an exam room at a doctor's office, not an ER room. And then they came in, they said, you know, your oxygen's running a little low. We're gonna give you some oxygen. And I said, okay. I didn't think much of it. The seriousness started to hit me when they came in with a wheelchair, and they go, we're just gonna move you to a little bit bigger room, you'll be more comfortable. And I'm thinking, well, maybe they need this room for a child that's coming and it's less intimidating. When they wheeled me to this big room with all this equipment, something hit me, something's up. And the doctor came in a full hazmat suit. And he said to me, he said, we got a problem. He said, you tested positive for COVID. We have you on 6 liters of oxygen. You're not sustaining. We believe you're about to go into critical any minute now.
So he said, we believe you're about to go into critical
any minute now.
Okay. And you took that to mean?
Serious.
Right.
And then the next part kind of got me. He goes, we need your permission to put you on a ventilator. And that really hit me. And I looked at him and I go, is that really necessary? You know, like he's going to say it if it wasn't. And he said, yeah, it's going to be better if we vent you now than if we wait till you hit critical. And you're going to hit critical any minute now. So I said, okay, I need 1 minute to send a text to my cousin and to send 1 text to work. He then came back, and I looked at him, and this was the scariest moment. They're hooking me up to run the ID, you know, because when you hook up to the ventilator, they knock you out. And I looked at the doctor, and I could see his face through the face shield on the hazmat suit. And this is probably the scariest moment for me, because I asked him, am I going to wake up from this? And he looked at me and he goes, I don't know, but I promise you we're going to do everything we can for you.
Wow. So I know it seems like a silly question, but he says that. You ask the question.
Yeah.
He responds in that way.
Yes.
They're about to put you under.
Yes.
You've already texted a couple people, right?
Yes.
When he says that, is it, just pure fear, is it? Or just what is the feeling?
You know, it's funny when you say pure fear, because I've been in dangerous situations, but this was different. And yeah, there was a pure fear that was going through me, a lot of prayer going, and nervousness.
Was there prayer going?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I looked at him and I told the doctor, I said, okay, listen, in a sound mind, and I guess I was somewhat sound body, I told him, I said, you do whatever it takes to keep me alive. This is my wish. I said, even though my cousin has power of attorney, my wish is you do everything it takes to keep me alive. I said, I will fight. And your staff in here, there were like 2 or 3 medical staff in there in hazmat suits. And I said, they're witnesses. I said, so you do whatever it takes to keep me alive.
Was that a playful moment when you said, these are my witnesses?
I think it might have been a defense mechanism. It was part fear, but part sincerity and trying to be positive. It's all at the same time. And he said, I promise you we will.
Gotcha. Okay, so you go under.
Yes, sir.
And what do you remember happening next?
So before I go into that, because it's related, on March 30th at 2:30, 2:35, and 2:36 in the morning.
That's 4 years ago today.
I wake up, I had this bizarre dream, and I wake up and I just can't breathe. But in the dream...
This is at home, right?
Yeah, I'm at home. So I'm at home, and in this dream state, the morning before I'm hospitalized, I have this dream that something's punching my chest, I'm laying horizontally, and I'm going up in the air, and there's all these people running around in hazmat suits, Mars lights going off, a beep-bop siren like alarm going off, and they're all running around. And I want to say, hey, what's going on? But I can't talk. So then I open my eyes, I wake up, there's like bright white light, and I'm like, I see everybody running around in hazmat suits. So fast forwarding.
That was the dream.
That was the dream.
That was all the dream. The hazmat suits and everything else was the dream. It
was my dream the night before. So while I'm under in an unconscious state, they've got me hooked up. I'm on the ventilator. I'm in this place, and I'm not alone. I can't see who's there with me. I just know I'm not alone. And I'm in this place, and there's a voice. And the voice is pointing at, can't see the voice pointing, but there's a voice that says, that's your spot. And I remember saying, but I don't want to go. And the voice comes back a second time and says, that's your spot. And again, the second time I say, but I don't want to go. The third time, the voice comes back and says, again, that's your spot. And I start to lift up my left leg. Don't ask me how I know it's my left leg, just what I remember. And I remember saying to the voice, but I don't want to go. Okay, but only if that's what God wants. At that point, I felt like something punched my chest, and I'm going up in the air, and I open my eyes, and there's, just like in my dream the morning before, the day before, I'm looking up at this bright ceiling light in this room, and everything I saw in my dream, people running around in hazmat suits, the Mars lights going off, the beep-bop alarm going off, everything I saw in my dream. And as I'm coming down and I hit the table, I want to say, hey, what's going on? But I can't talk because I'm hooked up to a ventilator. And that was the last thing I remembered until I woke up, I don't know how many days later, in the ICU.
So to make sure that we understand this, so we understand the dream, and that what you actually experienced replicated that dream pretty specifically, all those details, and you were up in the air. Like when you had that, in the room, literally, you felt like you were up in the air.
Yeah.
And that something there been some sort of impact on you.
Yeah. And so just to add to that, the relevance, so when I came to in the room, the nurse is standing there, doctor's in there, and the nurse is all excited. Gary, you're waking up, you made it. And I'm happy I'm waking up, but I don't understand why she's so excited. And I later found out because they lost so many people because of COVID. And I still haven't grasped. I know it's serious, I know I'm on the ventilator, but my senses were a little dulled at that point. I still had a high fever, and so now they get me going. About 2 days after I woke up, and they told me if you can stay awake for another 15, 20 minutes, we'll take you off the ventilator. Part of me wanted to go back to sleep, but something saying, don't go back to sleep. And I fought to stay awake, and about 20 minutes later, they took me off the ventilator, put a full mask on me. I was on 6 liters of oxygen again. And that was everything in the ER. They told me, they had me on 6 liters and I wasn't sustaining. So now I'm back on 6 liters of oxygen off the ventilator. 2 days after that, they let me have my cell phone. The first person I called was my doctor, because he's the one who told me to get to the hospital. And I call his office and I go, may I speak to Dr. Stern? And they go, he's with a patient now. I said, okay, well, tell him Gary Merrill called. Oh, no, hold on. They put my call right through. And he gets on the phone. I said, hey, I just want to say thanks for saving my life. He goes, thanks for surviving. And I go, yeah, right. He goes, how much do you know? I'm in the hospital. I was on a ventilator. He says, you want to know everything? I said, yeah. And here's what I found out. I was in the hospital. I knew I had COVID. I knew I was on a ventilator. I did not know. What he told me was that they had a shock in my heart. And I later found out from medical staff that they had a shock in my heart 3 times. And my temperature, it hit 104.1. And my doctor told me, he said, we really didn't think you were going to make it.
So Gary, that shocking of the heart, is that what?
With the paddles and the electro.
Is that the experience that you had when you were, had been sort of elevated or risen up?
So when they shock your heart, you go up a little bit.
Right, and then you kind of.
Come down.
Came down, and that's when you.
The third time, it was after the third time that I opened my eyes.
Do you think the 3 times of them saying, I'm guessing not, but do you think the 3 times of the voice saying that's your spot, and the 3 booms were coincided with each other, or do you think that's was?
Yeah, I think so, because I really feel where I was standing, if I had put my foot in to the spot that they were saying that was my spot, that was it.
There's no image to the voice.
No, just the voice. And it was when I said it the third time, but I don't want to go, but okay, but only if that's what God wants. Right. And as soon as I said that, that's when boom, and then there was the light. And
got it. So we've talked a lot. Gary and I have had, as many of you have, because Gary's very open. You share a lot, which we appreciate. And I know that the COVID experience obviously has been clearly very negative in some obvious ways, and maybe some not obvious ways, but there's also been, you've learned from it.
Yes.
I believe as well. And Talmud actually talks about learning from our illnesses. And then others say, well, why learn from suffering? You're like, what is the, should we even talk about that possibility? It almost justifies suffering. Do you feel like, what have you learned from this experience, or what are you continuing to learn?
Well, I always know I'm not perfect and try not to take things for granted, but I've learned about being even more appreciative of what I have. I've learned to rather be thankful for what I have than unthankful for what I don't. I've learned to take certain things a lot more seriously, and just keep doing the best I can and keep fighting.
Do you have a greater sense of gratitude now? Do you feel like you were wanting for gratitude in your psyche before this experience? And
I don't think I was wanting for gratitude because I was very fortunate. I was hit with everything. Obviously you always want some things we desire that we don't have. Want things to be better. But I think it just enhanced my gratitude for what I had.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. How are you feeling these days? What's going on with you now? 4 years.
I've made some progress, which is good. Unfortunately, it left me with lung disease. I have moderate restrictive lung disease. I have moderate obstructive lung disease, and I have nerve damage from the COVID. Mm-hmm. Some of which has gotten better, some of which I was told will never go away. So I get injections every 8 weeks for my breathing. I'm on a number of medications and inhalers.
You might remember, folks, that Gary for a long time we only saw Gary via Zoom on the screen for a long time, the Minion and so forth. And then, I don't know how long it's been since you started coming back here, but it's really been a great change in your life. How has this experience, or I shouldn't assume that there's an answer to this, has this experience changed your spiritual life, your relationship with God?
So I've always believed in God, but how can I put it? I didn't always practice every strict law, but I think there's more things that I look at and I pay even more attention to than I did before. I didn't think my belief in God could get any stronger, but somehow it definitely has. And just very, very thankful for everything.
Mm-hmm. Some people, people react in two different ways to suffering, struggles. Some don't embrace God, but really reject. Was there any sort of crisis in that realm for you as well?
Not in terms of rejection, no. Embracing, definitely.
Anger?
I think there was anger, but not at God. Mm-hmm. There was anger, I think, with regards to what happened. There was anger, some things, I saw some positive things, the way COVID was handled, like the vaccines being no charge for people to get. But there were other things in the way it was handled. I had anger for the way things were being handled.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple of very brief questions at the end, but we have time for one, maybe two questions. Anyone have any questions for Gary? Yes, Jeff?
Right. So
let me repeat the question. Okay. So Jeff Koch is asking, when they took you off the ventilator, yes, having had anesthesia, what was that like to come off the ventilator?
It's funny, there were two things going through my mind. This is not going to be fun. And number two, on the other hand, I was also very, very thankful. Hey, I'm alive. And I remember gripping the sides of the guardrail, thinking this is going to be bad. But it really, when they took me off, I guess I was so focused on how bad it was going to be. When they got me off of it, it really wasn't as bad for me as I thought it was going to be.
And again, how many days after? How long were you on the ventilator?
I forgot. It was somewhere between 2 and 4, so I was lucky because there were some people that were on there for weeks. But I was in the ICU for well longer than that because they would not discharge me out of the ICU until I was temperature-free, and then they sent me to a step-down unit.
I see. Got it. Other questions for Gary? Anyone? Gary, Coke or Pepsi?
Coca-Cola. Pepsi's a good product. Don't get me wrong to all the Pepsi drinkers, but Coke.
They're not going to sue you. Beatles or Beach Boys?
That's easy for me. I know Jeff's laughing back there. Beach Boys all the way. Beatles are a great group. Don't get me wrong. Very talented.
They won't sue you.
Beach Boys, hands down.
We talked about this part too. Gary Merrill, continued refuah, continued healing, shlema, and thank you so much for sharing with us on your birthday. Thank you.
Thank you so much.